Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the information in this presentation is not to be or construed as investment advice. The information presented are subject to change without notice, and while we have made every reasonable effort to ensure that the content is reliable and accurate, we have not independently verified the content and are not responsible for errors therein. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets. Hi everyone, my name is Richard Diaz and welcome back to the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap. In this week's video, we were going to discuss the 2024 fall economic statement, and I was going to share my views on the growing budget deficit and what it might mean for Canadians and the loonie, as well as some of the parallels we're seeing across the rich world. But we have to address what many of you might already know, the chaos created by the now former finance minister. So what motivated Chrystia Freeland to quit her dual role as Canada's finance minister and deputy prime minister, leaving the cabinet altogether and fueling speculations that she would challenge for party leadership in due course? Well, on Friday, Freeland was told by the prime minister in a Zoom call that she would be replaced as finance minister by former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney on Tuesday, a day after this government had promised to deliver one of the most anticipated fall economic statements ever. So after sticking with the prime minister for 9 long years through the carbon tax, raising capital gains taxes, censoring the internet, bail reform, frozen bank accounts, huge deficits, and record debt levels, she wrote an absolutely scorching resignation letter citing costly political gimmicks as the final straw, and that Canadians know when politicians are focused on themselves. All of this with zero hint of irony. Freeland quit just minutes before the fall economic statement was supposed to be revealed to journalists and, more importantly, the citizens and taxpayers of this country, waiting until the last possible second to cause maximum damage to Justin Trudeau and chaos in the cabinet as they scrambled for a warm body to take the chair. Unfortunately for Canadians, while Freeland was angling for her next job, good luck by the way, the Earth was still spinning and Canada still needs a budget. And it's also important to stress that this was no ordinary fall economic statement. In fact, this was one of the most anticipated fiscal updates in a generation, given that it was supposed to be tabled in late October and then was pushed back to November and then finally Monday. So now that we understand Monday's drama, let's shift our focus back to where it belongs. The numbers. The fall economic statement is a mid-year update presented by the government to provide an overview of a country's economic performance, fiscal projections, and an update on key policy initiatives. It is a big deal, especially when there are growing doubts about a country's fiscal position or if an economy is facing serious challenges like a recession. So, briefly, what were the main takeaways? The first is that the much talked about fiscal anchor is totally bogus. The budget deficit for this fiscal year will be 50% higher than what was projected, or $62 billion. And who knows if it won't be higher than that. There is 3 long months left in the fiscal year. This fiscal bombshell, a deficit of 2.1% of GDP, is up from the 35 or so billion, or 1.2% of GDP we saw last year. According to Chart A1.1, the miss reflects an additional $16.4 billion related to Indigenous contingent liabilities and about $5 billion in liabilities or write-offs related to COVID fiscal supports. Clearly, the government was not expecting the need to book these liabilities. The Auditor General had a different opinion, and this is yet another hit to the government's fiscal planning credibility. And, as you can imagine, First Nations were justifiably upset about being blamed for the cost overruns. And it's worth noting that this line item has grown nearly 7-fold since Justin Trudeau took office, from $11 billion in 2015 to about $76 billion, according to the Parliamentary Budget Office. The truth is, this government has lost control of spending. Given that the fall economic statement is a financial health check for Canada, there's always a section on forecasts for growth and debt, inflation, etc. As you can imagine, they are extremely optimistic, bordering on fantasy. Now, to be clear, governments of all political stripes are guilty of this. That doesn't make it right. Bogus forecasts today make for missed targets tomorrow. And that's exactly what we have here. The expectations are for no recession and for growth to accelerate in the next few years. And this flows into optimistic debt to GDP forecast, which of course permits huge deficit spending in the first place. It's all connected, it's circular, garbage in, garbage out. This brings me to my biggest pet peeve, the lie that is net debt, and using that as cover for being fiscally reckless. What is net debt, you ask, and why is it baloney? Well, to calculate net debt, the government takes gross debt, or liabilities, and subtracts pension plan assets. That means using your savings to theoretically pay down federal government debt. Not only is that a morally bankrupt view of our finances, it's unclear if that's even legal. When you hear net debt, it should raise alarm bells. The reality is, gross federal government debt is continuing to rise, and the reason that the debt to GDP ratio is relatively well behaved is because GDP in this case is nominal, meaning that it reflects the record inflation we've suffered over the past few years, hiding the debt explosion. Furthermore, these higher debts come at a cost, or interest payments. And again, you can see that being fiscally irresponsible is not benign. It's not just some theoretical problem. In a world of higher interest rates, more and more tax money is being diverted to meet rising debt charges. Indeed, federal interest payments are projected to be $47.3 billion, or 95% of federal health spending this year, and forecasted to eclipse health spending next year. What's more is that this situation is likely to get worse. Deficits in Canada are growing, and we are not even in a technical recession, although regular viewers will know that I think we are already there. As growth slows and unemployment rises, there will be even less tax revenue to meet obligations, and this guarantees even bigger deficits going forward. Not good. Now, there's always a relief valve in capital markets and economics, and in our case, it's the loonie. We continue to believe that reckless spending paired with weak growth or productivity will continue to exert pressure on the Canadian dollar, especially in relation to the US. Final takeaway is that the inability to restrain spending is a growing problem in the rich world. Germany, France, UK, and many other countries face the same problem. And this reflects and is related to one of IceCap's overarching investment themes: global risk is synchronized. In this case, it's about unsustainable sovereign debt burdens and the lack of political will to address this issue head on. Either spend less money or become more productive. The specific risks to financial markets are clear, and we've positioned our portfolio to mitigate this as best we can. But that's the subject of a future video. All right, so that's a wrap for this week's episode. Thanks very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more. And as always, we manage money for families all across the country and the world. So as always, feel free to get in touch.